Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I got my current top 10 favorite glute focused exercises for you. These are the exercises I find myself gravitating towards the most, and my glutes have just responded really well to. So let's get into it. No specific order. First up is heavy barbell hip thrust. My most used and loved rep range is typically staying around 6 to 10 reps for a good mix of strength and hypertrophy. Here I am showing my favorite rep scheme, 10-8-6, and I do prefer using a constant tension method here, as you see, rather than a standard thrust where you would go completely to the floor and back up. I will incorporate that variation into my training with lower reps when I am really trying to go for it with the numbers, just so I can have that full reset and lower body drive I need. But for a majority of my training, when I am focusing on both strength and hypertrophy, I do like to keep the tension on my glutes as much as I can throughout the set. Number 2 is another variation of thrust, and that is single leg landmine thrust. I have really fallen in love with single leg thrust variations over the years because of the results I have seen and also their translation over into my other thrusts and building strength. Now, the reason I love the landmine variation specifically so much is because it is the easiest variation to be able to load with actual challenging weight while also being comfortable throughout the set. It just really allows you to push your strength and keep the tension on the glutes without having to focus on holding and balancing a weight on your leg throughout this set. And for these, usually when I'm programming them, I like a 10 to 15 rep range typically, but obviously this can vary depending on the workout and the overall goal. Number 3 is reverse lunges. Any variation, to be honest, is great, but my personal favorites that I use the most are either deficit or standard Smith machine reverse lunges and then deficit dumbbell reverse lunges. The deficit is created by the plate I am on, so I am able to go lower and achieve a further stretch in my working glute at the bottom of the movement. Now, typically with the Smith machine variation, I love for lower rep ranges, usually 6 to 8, and then with the dumbbell variation, I love for higher reps. Now, y'all know lunges are a tricky movement for me because of my previous knee injuries. So the Smith machine variation allows me to load as heavy as I need for lower rep ranges without the risk of instability. And then with the dumbbell deficit reverse lunges, as you see here, I will also lightly hold on to something with one hand and then the weight with the other, and I'll do one side at a time. Just make sure that if you are going to use a stability hold, that you do not use it at all to pull you up or do any of the work for you. Number 4 is glute bias Bulgarian split squats. So to make these more glute bias, you will want to have a wider stride so that as you go down, your front shin is able to stay vertical. You also want to have a slight torso lean forward, and as you go down, you want to think sitting back into that working glute rather than just moving up and down. Just like with the deficit dumbbell reverse lunges, I also use a light hold here as well. Again, lightly holding, not pulling up at all. So I really like to challenge myself with loads on this movement and will typically aim for 8 to 12 reps depending on the goal and how heavy I end up going. Number 5 is straddle lifts. I love me some straddle lifts. So think of this movement like a mix between a squat and a hinge. You're hinging those hips back as you squat down with the weight. Now, depending on your mobility, you will want to elevate yourself accordingly and then either hold onto a dumbbell or a kettlebell from below while performing the exercise. You want to be high enough so that when you reach the bottom with the weight, it's still off the ground so that you don't lose any of that tension you've built up in your glutes at the bottom of the movement. This lift has been a staple in my glute training for years and probably always will remain in my top 10 because I just love it that much. I also love to add pauses and pulses. You can get pretty creative with this exercise, but I just absolutely love it for the glutes. Number 6 is RDLs, more specifically dumbbell RDLs. I just find using dumbbells to give me the best contact while focusing on that stretch and really feeling it where I want to be. I usually like an 8 to 12 rep range depending on the variation and the overall workout, and I love to either use a standard dumbbell RDL or implement an extra quarter rep at the bottom where the glutes are under the greatest amount of tension in the exercise. Now, if you're somebody who struggles to feel your glutes in an RDL, it is most likely because your form is favoring your hamstrings over your glutes. So what you want to do is as you begin to drive your hips back and travel down with the weight, I want you to allow for a bit more knee bend. This will help decrease the hamstrings while increasing the amount of glutes, because by having a greater knee bend, it allows you to achieve a greater stretch in your glutes as you drive back. If you perform a stiff knee RDL and then perform a rep how I just explained, your mind will be blown at the difference in feeling your glutes working. So once you achieve that full stretch in your glute by pushing your hips back as far as you can, think of contracting or squeezing your glutes hard to help drive you out of that hole back into position, and that is how you perform a glute bias RDL. Definitely still getting the hamstrings here, don't get me wrong, but it'll just help you feel your glutes and get a little bit more glutes out of the movement. Now, number 7 here is going to look a bit different than you may be used to, and that is a glute bias back extension. My gym used to have the equipment, which if you go back, you can see me use it in many of my glute videos, but they did end up replacing it with a GHD, which I am not a huge fan of for glute bias. I still use it from time to time, but I had then seen Brett Contreras post this setup alternative using the Smith machine, and I am so glad he did because I much prefer this to the GHD. So obviously, if you have the back extension equipment, then you don't need to do this, but I am performing this mock variation just because it suits my situation. So to make this movement glute bias, you are going to round the upper back, which is to essentially keep those spinal erectors from firing up. You then want to make sure you only come up to the point that your glutes are fully contracted. Once you reach that point, you can go back down. This will keep you from hyperextending that lower back by coming up too high. And moving right along is number 8, the good old glute cable kickback. I think a staple in everyone's training these days. So what I like to do is elevate my non-working side on a plate. This will help keep my working foot from snagging on the ground. I will incorporate all different types of reps and variations with these, just depending on the workout. Some that I love are to use heavier loads for like 10 reps, higher reps like 15 to 20, pause reps for 2 seconds at the top, or even complexes where I will combine standard kickbacks with other kickback variations back to back to target all different parts of my glutes. And number 9 is another kickback variation, and that is a glute angled or glute medius kickback. This variation, rather than kicking back like you would a standard glute kickback, you're actually kicking out at around 30 degrees, out at an angle from your body. This is to target your glute medius. You will want to be more upright with this, with just a slight hinge for these, using that cable machine to brace yourself. And as you bring that weight back in, you will actually want to allow your working foot to travel in front of your body to further maximize the stretch. Standing on a plate here for this variation can also be helpful for foot snagging and also with traveling that foot forward. And for these, I usually like 12 to 15 reps per set. And lastly, number 10 is a high foot placement leg press. The high feet will allow you to get maximal stretch in your glutes while avoiding excessive knee drive. This helps it bias more glutes and hamstrings and less quads. I usually like higher reps for glute bias leg presses, like 12 to 15, and then I will do heavier standard leg presses on a quad or full lower body day. So that wraps up my current top 10 glute focused exercises. Like if I want just to really fire up my glutes glutes and basically demolish them, these are 10 of my favorites. I obviously do a lot more exercises, variations, techniques, rep schemes, yada, yada, yada. Just a whole lot of other things that overall contribute to my glute development. But these are specifically glute-focused movements that have worked wonders for me in my training and building my glutes. So try incorporating some of these into your next booty day and let me know how it goes. Thank you guys so much for watching. My 12-week workout program can be found in the description box below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.